Hello, it's great to be here. My name is Hayley Peltz and I am the Campus Recruiter for CBIZ. I think one of the core things to do to really explore campus recruiting a little bit more is to really understand what's important to you. And that's going to really guide how you approach all of these campus events and how you interact with other recruiters, is you really do have to understand what are those kind of core non-negotiables? What are those really important aspects that you want to make sure that they align with your values? So whether that's a national firm, maybe a regional firm, or maybe a local firm, depending on that size of firm, it's important that you might want to explore those possibilities, whether you want to go into public accounting or private accounting. Maybe you want to only stay in a specific location, like I only want to stay in Los Angeles, so you want to make sure that that firm has an office in that location. It's also important that you're, exploring the culture and the people. Maybe that's important to you as well. What are the types of personalities that you work best with? As you're going into these virtual events, they might have different representatives from different service lines that come up, and it's sort of a preview of these are the type of professionals that you might be working with. These might be your future colleagues, so that's good to keep in mind. It's also good to keep in mind the office size. Maybe some people like working in a really big office location. Others like it to be more on like the mid-size or a smaller size. So they're not lost in the crowd. It's really up to you. I think it's also important to make sure that your service line or department that you want to go into is represented in that firm. That's something that's good to consider. Also, it's good to think about if this is important to you, of the type of exposure you want to client work, whether or not, maybe if you're working in a really large firm and you're working on really massive clients, you're inherently going to become a little bit more specialized. So do you want to become more specialized, or do you want to have maybe more exposure and have like a well-rounded experience, and you get to see many different, maybe the full audit cycle, or maybe different types of tax returns? That's something to consider as well. Maybe considering the training, maybe it's really important to you if there's a national training, or there's a regional training, or like a local individual training. That's important as well. It's also when you might want to consider, is it important if you are interacting frequently with managers, or how often you interact with leadership? Maybe that's important to you as well. Does the firm provide CPA prep materials? And maybe if they're involved in community involvement, or what other maybe resource programs they offer as well. So once you've kind of identified, I know that I listed out a long list of things to consider. I know that all of those might seem really important, but when you have like your true core kind of top things that are really important to you, those are the things that you should guide you when you're talking to recruiters and talking to any members from that firm, asking those important questions. So you're going to ask questions that relate to those type of core values that you want to include. And so I think it's also important to consider who you're talking to. If you're talking to a tax manager, you might talk with them a little differently than you would with like a recruiter, or maybe like an entry-level person. So I think it's good to consider all the types of questions that you're asking and what is going to be most important to you. I also think something that's important as well when you're asking all those important questions is finding out how firms kind of responded, or maybe didn't respond to some of the current events, or how they handled whether it was the pandemic response. Did they lay off anybody? Did they rescind offers? How did they transition their workers to working from home? Maybe what are their diversity efforts, and what steps they're making to increase those? Those are also really important questions to ask as well, if those are important to you, since it does show how the firm responded, and what you can expect if you join that firm, how they might handle that in the future as well. I do also want to say, I just kind of want to put it out there that kind of relating back to a firm concern, is I would recommend just exploring your options. You might have heard of a firm and you're kind of dead set on going to this one firm, but I highly recommend checking out all firms and really exploring their websites, finding out do they meet those kind of core criteria for you, and really exploring your options, because you never know what's out there. And if you're kind of only looking at like a couple firms, you might be missing out. I'd also recommend, especially if you're on campus and you're going through the recruiting cycle, is to really check out your career center. Oftentimes they're going to have a lot of great resources for you. And a lot of times that this is already paid for as part of your like your tuition. Part of that money goes to the Career Center, so you're already paying for these services, and so they might, even though it's virtual now, they still might do resume reviews, they might do mock interviews. So I think it's definitely a great opportunity to take advantage of those resources while you're in school, and you can still leverage those. If your school's also on Handshake, I would recommend also checking out Handshake as well. It's sort of the LinkedIn for college campuses, and so you can even apply for jobs there. You can message firms there. People can leave reviews about the internships with that specific firm. So definitely check out Handshake.